Marzulli ha llevado a cabo un extenso trabajo de campo en todo el mundo, investigando evidencia de gigantes, también conocidos como Nephilim, descubiertos y encubiertos en los Estados Unidos y en otros lugares por organizaciones poderosas como el Instituto Smithsoniano. Muestra los hallazgos que hizo sobre los cráneos alargados en diversas partes del planeta, y que no son fruto de deformaciones intencionadas, sino que eran una especie de híbridos, más grandes que los humanos normales, gigantes híbridos, fruto del cruce genético entre humanos y extraterrestres que llegaron a la Tierra para crear la Granja Prisión. Cita textos históricos que muestran que los gigantes florecieron en civilizaciones humanas anteriores, especialmente en un mundo prediluviano descrito en el libro de Enoch. Él los describe como las ramificaciones de experimentos híbridos genéticos que involucran a extraterrestres y humanos primitivos.
1999, and you portrayed this issue, or what you knew of giants or the Nephilim, in terms of this fiction based on facts, or so at that time, 1999, and up until 2004, you write this trilogy. So what inspired you to write that trilogy? And you had UFO experiences, so what drove you?
There's a book called The Omega Conspiracy. I have it on my desk here because this is the book that changed my life. It's by my mentor, Dr. Ike E. Thomas. And later on, when it was republished, I got to write the forward to it, figure. So that book literally changed my life, The Omega Conspiracy, because what he was talking about in that book was that there were giants on the earth. There were giants on the earth. And some of these giants were 12, 14, 16 feet tall. And there's ancient prophetic texts which talk about the giant up in the, that's a ticket. Here it is. Return to Catalina. So this is the picture that I discovered in the archives right there. That's the picture. And it shows Ralph Glidden, 1919. He's employed at this time by the Hay Museum. In front of him is a really big guy, okay? Really big. He's about 9 feet tall. And that's what I mean. You get out and you start doing some research, and lo and behold, these things start to come to light. So when we go back to the museum, I think it's like right in here. Hold on, let's see if I can find it. The museum does this. There's the picture. They cropped the giant out of the picture. So of course we filmed all that, and that went viral. So being on the trail, this has been like a lifelong quest since I was a kid. My paradigm has shifted since I was a kid, but it's the same curiosity that drives me to create these films, create these books. There were giants here. There's no doubt about it. We have evidence of it. That one picture that I just showed you from the Catalina Museum, and then they redact the giant out of the picture. Why would they do that? Why? Can you imagine if you put on the marquee at the Catalina Island Museum, come see the authentic pictures of the Catalina Island giant? The line would be around the block, right? But they don't do that. Why don't they do that? Why are they so? What are they so afraid of? I did a show today on the elongated skulls. It was an archaeological report about this group of ancient skulls found in Japan, and they're saying, well, all these things were cranial head-boarded, cranial deformation, and we're not saying that didn't exist. We know that. But in our film on the DNA evidence, and we're one of the few people that have ever gone down to Paracas, Peru. We took 56 samples. When you look at the orbits, they're about 25 to 30% larger than a normal human being. There's an absence of a sagittal suture. There's no sagittal suture, which should be here. It's not there. It doesn't exist. But the smoking gun, and this is the work of our anthropologists on our team, is the placement of the foramen magnum. That's the foramen magnum right there. Now, this is clay that was put in when Joe Taylor did the mold to put a dowel in there. So, but that foramen magnum should be here. Let me get a pen. It's easier. That foramen magnum should be here in the center of the skull. You can't reposition the foramen magnum through cranial deformation. You can't do that. You can't move it. The foramen magnum is set in utero when this thing is in the womb. It should be here to balance the skull. And the Paracas skulls, not all of them, but some of them are cranial headboarded. You can see this, and it's all the way to the occipital plate, all the way to the rear of the skull. And hats off to Brian Forrester, who took Senior Juan's information in the Paracas Museum and broadcast it on YouTube. Someone sent that to me, and voila, I was writing to Brian, and next thing you know, we're down in Paracas. But our team is one of the few teams. There's another one apparently from Gaia, according to Brian, that went down, and they took samples. And what's amazing is the samples that we took showed that many of them, not all, but many of them, have a Middle Eastern origin. And that rewrites history. Of course, the academics say, well, it really doesn't rewrite history because everything's contaminated. But we put our own DNA samples in, and that was tested in a lab. So if it was contaminated, why didn't we get nuclear DNA?
Más adelante, el Dr. Michael Salla explica un hallazgo que ha podido investigar y descubrir junto a otros expertos en el tema ufológico, que los extraterrestres tienen la habilidad de traspasar sus conciencias a cuerpos modificados genéticamente para poder acceder a este planeta. Por eso crearon entidades como avatares físicos para habitar entre los humanos de la antigüedad y darles las normas de conducta y sistemas de adoración, porque como ya he dicho en anteriores ocasiones, estos seres pertenecientes a la corporación Arconte se alimentan de esas vibraciones, entre otras muchas, la energía de adoración que se acumulan en centros religiosos, iglesias, mezquitas, etc.
Give us what seems to be healing arts or architectural ability. Just they give us knowledge. Enoch talks about it. The Sumerian texts talk about it. It's always the same thing. What's the end game? What do they want? They want to be worshipped. They want to be worshipped. And that we see this repeated over and over and over again. They want the worship. And you have to ask yourself and go, well, why these, what's going on here? But it's the same deal until Moses and Aaron show up thousands of years afterwards. I mean, the Anunnaki are here, they're doing their stuff. There are city-states and it's all wiped out in the flood, and it's all gone. And then the whole thing starts up again. And then you get these two guys, Moses and Aaron, who show up in Egypt. What most people don't realize, there's a full-blown occult paradigm in operation in Egypt when Moses and Aaron show up. I mean,
before we get there,
natural stuff.
So before we get to Moses and Aaron, what I'd like to kind of get you, because you said something very interesting, that these Anunnaki wanted to be worshipped. But when we go to the foundational texts like the Enuma Elish and the Atrahasis, it's very clear that the Anunnaki created these different human bodies. Some of those would have been giants because they wanted workers. They wanted workers to mine the gold, mine the precious resources, and they wanted absolute loyalty. That apparently, this one of these beings, Enlil and his offshoots, just wanted absolute loyalty. So worship was a part of that. But another one of the Anunnaki, Enki, he apparently seemed to be more of a free thinker. He wanted the humans to be intelligent, free thinking, and think for themselves. So that seemed to be the conflict. So I just wanted you to kind of dig a little bit into the dynamics of what the Sumerian texts tell us about the Anunnaki, how they had different philosophies about how humans and giants would be exploited, and this kind of idea of free thinking, wise humans backed by, say, the Enki faction, and these worshipping kind of like warlike humans and giants that are supported by the Enlil faction.
Well, and again, all we have is what the Sumerian clay tablets show us. I mean, which is astounding when you think about it, just from the aspect of an archaeological record. I'm still wading through that in the sense that, I can't say definitively this led to this and this led to that. What I do find interesting is the parallel between what we see in the Sumerian texts and what we see in Enoch. And we know that it's like the Sumerian text. It seems to be a mixed bag, to use your phrase. It seems, because even in Enoch, it seems to be this mixed bag. But there's some entities that show up and want, like you just said, complete loyalty. Others are different, and yet, I think from my viewpoint, from what I know right now, the overarching theme of these guys seems to be control. That their worship and control. That's ultimately what they're after. So they'll give knowledge, they'll dispense certain things out. Where are they getting that from, right? But they'll do that and they'll dazzle humans. And they're also, on both sides of the aisle, obsessed with creating a hybrid. They're obsessed with that. I think we can agree on that. They're obsessed with creating some sort of a hybrid entity, the mixing of the seed, which goes back to ancient prophetic texts, the seed of the dragon, seed of the woman.
Yeah, that effort to create hybrids, especially in ancient times, I just wanted to raise a theory, is that's because the Anunnaki themselves could not actually inhabit the Earth, because they come from another solar system. Their genetics are different. Their need for their atmospheric content is different. So what they did was they created these avatar bodies. And my theory is that these avatar bodies ranged in height, from 50 feet to like 6 feet, and that the Anunnaki, they would just transfer their consciousness to one of these avatar bodies. And so you would have an Anunnaki lord like Enlil, who would transfer his consciousness into, say, a 50-foot giant, and he would just kind of lord it over the humans. So, yeah, what do you think of that theory that the Anunnaki created these hybrid bodies and these different giants because they wanted avatars for their consciousness to be transferred, and that they preserve these bodies, which is why they have, like the mounds and different secret places where they have stasis chambers with these giants perfectly preserved, because these are avatar bodies for the Anunnaki.
The avatar bodies, and I'll get to that in a second. We're seeing the same thing in ufology today. In my opinion, the Greys are avatars. The Greys are avatars. They are constructs. So these other entities can use their bodies to manifest in this dimension. To your point, it's very similar. I mean, what are we really looking at? Pull back the curtain, because the Greys, in my opinion, are not. They're suits. They're meat suits. They're avatars, and we've heard this from experiences from people on board the ships. I think one guy we can both look at is Whitley Strieber. When he's aboard the ship and he opens up the drawer, and there are the Greys stacked like cordwood. What are they doing in there? Why are they just stacked up like this? So to your point with avatars, I agree. And when you say transfer consciousness, that's an interesting concept. They are possessing the avatar. They are coming in and possessing the avatar. A person.
Marzulli explica además que su investigación sobre el fenómeno de la abducción alienígena, según lo descrito por el Dr. David Jacobs, que lo ha llevado a la alarmante conclusión de que la humanidad está a punto de experimentar un evento que cambiará la vida en la Tierra, que involucra la aparición de extraterrestres engañosos involucrados en un programa global de hibridación genética. En el segmento final de la entrevista, Marzulli y el Dr. Michael Salla discuten la dinámica entre una benevolente federación galáctica y los engañosos extraterrestres grises, entre otros, que juegan papeles opuestos en las revelaciones globales que están a punto de ocurrir. Marzulli explica cómo los extraterrestres que están al mando del poder en la Tierra simularán una presentación de dioses salvadores diciéndonos que son nuestros creadores y que nos ayudarán a llevarnos a una era dorada.
Right now, we're having this unprecedented era in the United States, at least, of disclosure. UFOs are kind of like being studied. Multiple entities have been set up to investigate them. Congress is holding hearings. So it seems that something is about to happen. And I think it's something like what you've described, that the elite are aware of this, that the deep state are aware of this. And they're preparing, they're conditioning the public. And I think their goal is to make the public as fearful as possible. So, I mean, how do you be aware of this kind of like coming alien event, being aware without putting people into fear so that they can be manipulated?
Well, when they come, they will tell us that they created all life on this planet. They genetically manipulated early man. They started the world's earliest civilizations, that they started the world's religions. Now at this critical juncture in human history, they are back to usher mankind into a golden age.
That's you think that'll be a deception?
Absolutely, because they're not who they are. Let me ask you this, Michael. I'll throw you a hardball here. This is a 101 mile an hour fastball right down the center. Here we go. Is it okay to abduct a 5-year-old boy and implant him?
No.
Sir. There you go. You just stated my entire case. We've been talking for about an hour and a half here. That's it. When you boil it down to that, that tells us exactly who it is we're dealing with.
Well, that's my question. Is there more? Well, from my research, I would say that there are positive groups and negative groups, and David Jacobs in the thread,
right.
Bud Hopkins, right. They identified the negative groups, and I think that's great, because they exist, absolutely real, that is happening. But there are also positive groups that operate under a kind of non-intervention or non-interference principle that are watching and waiting, and you had this Israeli professor Haim Eshed that talked about the Galactic Federation. So do you have a positive group, kind of like in the Book of Enoch, watching, waiting, preparing to take action against whatever the negatives are left?
I would respectfully disagree with there's any good guys out there, because everybody I've ever talked to, it's the same old thing. I mean, why not just show up and give us the cure to cancer and quit screwing around? Why abduct the cattle and then just drop them or place them, as Chuck Zukowski would say, place them back in the field, which causes rippling effect of fear.